just long to put everything down, but you are, and I updated it with the people that are here tonight. So it should be good.
Can't remember like they used to.
Okay, so we've got everybody here. We don't have Tim Borton, correct?
Yes, he's here. He's right
Yes.
back next to Steve.
Oh, okay, I see him now. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the February 5th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting of Oregon City Council. The time is 7:05 PM. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Because it is a committee of the whole meeting, there is no need for roll call as it's not required attendance for council members, but please note that all council members are present and accounted for. Also in attendance this evening is Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Mazer, Clerk of Council Cassie Rawson, Law Director Melissa Purpura, Acting Public Service Director Rodney Schultz, Chief of Police Brandon Began, Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spanger, Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, Finance Director Nick Roman, Parks and Recreation Commissioner Tim Borton, Building and Zoning Commissioner Stephen Schrake. Thank you all. Folks, as we head into tonight's agenda, we are going to start with persons and delegations. We've got a fairly decent number of people that do want to address council this evening. Typically in committee of the whole, we don't always have this schedule, but we do want to add this on for this evening. What I would say before we come up, I'll call you up individually, state your name, your address, and then you can go ahead with your business. Because we do have several people that are out there, I'm going to try to limit us to 5 minutes in each time that we're going through, just to make sure we all have an opportunity to discuss this tonight. But remember, we are conducting a business meeting. The other thing I would address or say to everybody is remember tonight, you're addressing council. We don't want to get into a discussion amongst the audience. Make sure you're directing your comments and your statements to council. Council may or may not have a direct response or an answer for what you may have outside of thank you. And it may be a reason for a follow-up discussion at another time, okay? With that said, I'll call the first person, Val Virag, okay? Oh, and Dave Ferguson, okay? Got a joint presentation for Maumee Bay?
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, President, my name's Dave Ferguson, 7036 Corduroy in Oregon, Ohio, and I am the president of the Friends of Maumee Bay State Park, a volunteer organization that does fundraising and such for the park and puts on special events. And tonight we are announcing to all of you, and hopefully you can get your support, our newest project that we have undertaken. This spring, we are hoping to put in an 18-hole disc golf course. And this is something that we really don't have in this area per se. This will be a very challenging course, but yet family-friendly golf course. It's going to be 18 holes. It'll be out in the day use area strictly in the city of Oregon. And if you're familiar with that big hill out there at the park, it'll be out and around that big hill area. And we are really excited about this. We can't give you a date because we all know the weather plays such a huge factor because we have to put in. The tee pads will be 5 foot by 12 feet long in concrete, and we need certain weather for that. And it is going to have 3 par 4 holes and 15 par 3 holes, and we think it's going to be very challenging. One thing about disc golf, it is one of the top 3 sports in the United States right now. It has been for the last several years, and we are really excited to be putting this on, and we're just hoping for your support and just to let you know what's going on out at the park. So, any questions? Okay, thank you
No
very much.
questions. Thank you both. Next person signed in to speak tonight is Chris Belli. Chris, if you want to come forward, state your name and your address for the record, please. And just for council's awareness, there should be a handout that was distributed, should say City of Huron on the top of it. Some information provided by Chris to share with all council members and all the administration. Thank you. Please go ahead, Chris.
All right, Chris Belli, 2068 Lilas Drive. So we spoke, I believe, a couple weeks ago, just to follow up to some of that discussion. Sarah Stabaner, the neighbor to the one Airbnb that had the shots fired, the shell casings were found 10 feet from her front door. They were found by the cameras that she installed because the neighbor turned into an Airbnb. We also discussed some other things on the phone today. She actually said that she has had people come in the middle of the night, most likely to provide drugs or sell drugs to the Airbnb, but we're at the wrong address. I actually live across from another Airbnb, and I have seen people arrive at 2 or 3 in the morning and then immediately leave. So I'm not necessarily the sharpest guy, but I'm guessing that that's probably what was going on there. Last meeting, one of my big points to this was there is no accountability. So I truly believe that the accountability for these places, if they're going to exist, is going to have to be within policy. And we discussed that that was either difficult or not possible. So I went back and did some research. I talked to the city of Dublin, and they have actually incredibly strict policy for their Airbnbs. You should have I sent that one too. Did they get that one?
Yeah, I think.
Okay. Since we're time limited, I'm just going to briefly go over it. Theirs is incredibly strict where they limit the Airbnbs to 2 weeks per year. They have to be permitted. They have to pay a permit. And they have to report when the Airbnb guests are actually going to be there. I grew up in Huron, Ohio. If you're not familiar, it's the first town east of Sandusky. It's very similar to Oregon in that it's on the lake. Nice little bedroom community, a fabulous place to live. If you go to their website to get a hold of that permit application, they actually have in big red letters that all of their permits are sold out. So not only do they require the permitting of Airbnbs, having people pay for a permit, they also require you to register at the Erie County Courthouse or at Erie County so that you are registered as a lodging facility and you're paying lodging taxes. But they also limited how many Airbnbs can be in that town. And if you go on the website to get that paperwork in big red letters, all the permits are sold. So I called them to discuss it. I backtracked through some of the things we discussed earlier about whether or not there are any restrictions statewide or otherwise as to whether you can actually restrict Airbnbs, and they were not aware of them other than the fact that one that was trying to go through the state did not pass. So there's 2 examples of the ability to actually have policies in place to hold them accountable. I am very much opposed to any sort of a passive method of dealing with any of this. I definitely don't think any more parking signs on my street are going to work. I've gone through that with other issues that I've had, and it doesn't really change anything. Finally, the other, I guess, big point I brought up was in terms of community planning. How do you want your community to look? How you want your community to develop? The Huron example that I gave you, they purposely restricted it to a certain percentage because they didn't want to have any more property being used for those purposes. I actually was at a hockey game and went up and talked to Principal Jersky about the enrollment here at Oregon, and he mentioned that it is down. I don't know. You guys might be the ones that are actually working on some ways to deal with this. But I will tell you that one way to deal with it is to not sell houses that turn into hotels, especially ones that are in the range of what would be a starter home or somebody who probably wants to come and start being a resident of this town. My biggest concern is density. So I didn't find any examples of that in there, but my biggest concern is how many of these are going to end up on my street by the time it's all over. Right now, like I said, there's effectively 3 of them. I strongly anticipate one more of them at least popping up, which would make it like a 25% Airbnb from Bay Shore to the end of the road. With that, I guess from my perspective, I would like to at some point hear from the council as to whether they actually want to do something about this, whether they think that the stuff that I have presented has some merit, if that's the way you would want your community to eventually end up. I would volunteer my time to do research for you guys, as I did here, present examples for you guys to consult about and decide where you'd want to go with it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. And I would just comment to that is, I know some internal discussions have already taken place. I don't know if we're in a position to do any updating of what we have found, but we are looking into similar things as what you've researched and what was provided for this meeting this evening, with some other ideas and thoughts. So I think we're probably in a research and idea generation stage of
Sure.
what considerations does this look like for the city of Oregon, and what support does that have within this body? So I think we're starting to that. With that, I defer if anybody else has anything to add on. Mayor.
Mr. President, I was just going to say, Melissa, or our law director, is checking out what our restricting abilities will be and can present those to council to see just where they want to go and how they would want to restrict or set up the policy for Airbnbs.
Excellent. Like I said, I'm
Yes.
glad to help out.
Fair.
In both cases, I referred to any sort of laws that might have been in place or that they had to consider when they made those policies. And the best I could come up with was the mention that the state had put a bill in place, but it either failed or didn't go through for whatever reason. So thanks again.
Mr.
Thank you,
President,
Mr. Bell.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Wallenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Hornier. What committee do you feel this would fall under? Because I think moving forward, instead of discussing it just at a committee of the whole, maybe we sit down and have a full discussion on it for an hour, hour and a half. And so everybody can sit around the table and try to spitball things and come to a realization or conclusion of how we want to move forward after Melissa presents that stuff to us. And then city council sit down in that forum as opposed to a committee of the whole meeting.
I remember
Yep.
it from the
Thank you,
past,
Mr. Wallenstein.
the Economic Development
Right.
and Zoning Committee was the one that would probably be the most appropriate.
Yeah, and as we're considering not only the master plan becomes a city planning piece, potential looking at a city maintenance code, I think this falls under that same jurisdiction. We do have a meeting for next week. I don't think the agenda will allow for a lot of time for that, but we can reschedule one somewhere in the next, 30 days or so. Make sure that we're kind of exchanging some dialogue. That should give the administration some time to provide us with some more information, I think, to have a little bit stronger debate and discussion of what a possible resolution could be.
Yeah.
So I would say it would fall with economic development, which is my committee. And like I said, we will certainly make sure that we're doing something within the next 30 to 45 days.
Excellent. Yeah,
Mr.
just thought of a couple other things that were interesting in there. It does address parking. I know Huron made a rule that you have to provide off-street parking for.
And Huron has streets similar to ours near the water.
Correct.
I'm familiar with Huron.
Excellent.
Mr. President,
Great
Thank you.
place to live, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
thank you. Thank you for the information. We'll definitely make sure that we get something, try to get it on the books as soon as possible. But thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Next person we have signed in to speak is PJ Caphammer. PJ, if you can say your name, address.
PJ Caphammer, 3646 Navarre. Hear about Patty Joe's at 1705 South Wheeling. And we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary. So I just wanted to come in and invite some of you to partake in the celebration. It's Thursday. We're starting Thursday, February 15th. We'll name that tune. Friday, the 16th, we'll have DJ. Hopefully it's 80s music and 70s. And then Saturday, we have a live band there. It's been 1 year, and it's been a lot of work, and it's been a grind, but we're thriving. And I think it's important that we are locally owned, one of the few restaurants that are locally owned. I would say probably 90% of my employees live in Oregon. They work in Oregon. They spend their money in Oregon. The community has been really supportive. We're real busy. A lot of people said it couldn't be done, and I think we're proving them wrong. But we're enjoying it, and I just wanted to thank the city. It's been a pleasure dealing with everybody at the city. Whenever we got into a building that had some problems that we didn't know about, the city was real gracious in coming in and showing us what we needed to do, and we took care of it immediately. But I think a lot of times in the community, people tend to blame you guys for businesses not coming or other things, but it's not a hard concept if all you have to do is reach out to the city, and you'll send people there and walk you through it. It's not easy work sometimes, but sometimes you don't want to do it. But it's been a pleasure dealing with the city. You guys have been real gracious. I've seen a lot of you guys in the restaurant, and we enjoy seeing you. We do get really, really busy, but it's been a year, and I just wanted to invite everybody and thank you for allowing us to be one of the few locally owned business restaurants in Oregon and helping us thrive. It's just, I can't explain it enough that how gracious the city's been whenever something came up or something we needed. I don't know where the stigma comes up that you guys are stopping things, or you have your department heads are well educated, will walk you through anything. So it's been a fun process. So thank you. We have the 1 year coming up, and a lot of you I've seen eating there, and a lot of the community is in there every night. So we appreciate the support from the city, and just wanted to invite you guys to the 1 year. So thank you. I'm going to go back and get full of food.
Go back to work.
Yeah, 70 hours a week, but that's part of the fun grind. So,
We're good. And PJ, if you would get something to Cassie
yes,
with the details and the information, she has kind of comprising different events and activities in the city, communicating with council members. Be glad to add that to the list.
well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. The last person we have signed in to speak tonight is John Fellhauer. You come forward and state your name, your address, and committee.
Yes, my name is John Fellhauer, 2064 Blanche Drive, Oregon, Ohio. My wife Victoria.
Melissa James, 6015 Bryan Road.
And first of all, I want to say thank you for letting us have a few talk. But for Airbnb that we have right across from the street there, there's very high restrictions on this that we have to abide by. And for every person that we have in there, they're already looked at from Airbnb. So they all have to be qualified. We can't have someone that's going to come in and tear something up. Her restrictions on that is very strict of who we have, what we do. And yes, there's times that we're very fortunate for the guys that are staying there right now, that they come down and work on the ships, and they thank her every day for being able to have a place to cook, a nice place to be. And I think at one time they did have someone that came with, because they have the heavy duty trucks that come in there, but they went back out there after they put mud on the road, and they physically went out there and swept the road to make sure, because he went out there and yelled at them. So we're here to say we don't want it. All I know is I fixed that house up and put a lot of money in it so that it would look nice. So it'd be nice for Oregon and that. And I know the other possible Airbnb, they've stuck thousands of dollars into it to make it look nice. And I know they've worked very hard to improve the looks of our streets coming down there. So I don't, you have any?
Let alone when the people try to reserve the Airbnb, it will tell us most of the time where they are from. And if they are from Toledo, we do question them and say, you know, especially if it's a Friday or Saturday, what are your intentions for coming here? What, you know, a lot of people are just, last weekend, actually, somebody said we want to have an 18th birthday party for my son. And we said, well, what's an 18th birthday party? You know, we want to have a few people. We said, well, what's your few people for this 18th birthday party? Well, they retracted their reservation right then and there. Their intention was to have a party. Obviously, some things do get slipped through. I mean, we've had other people, obviously the shooting was at, I help manage Shad Helly's Airbnbs. He's actually out of the country, so I'm kind of here for him right now. The shooting was at Shad Helly's Airbnb. I was there within 10 minutes, cooperated with detectives, gave them all the footage we could have. Most neighbors at all of the Airbnbs that he owns knows that this Airbnb holds this many people. There should only be this many cars. The one on Lila sleeps 9. So if every person that is there drives a car, there should be maybe 9 cars there. How many, you know, and normally every person's not gonna drive in their own car. And we tell everyone, you know, if you think there's a party or something is off, call us or call the police. If you think that something is off and there's a party or something, we have no problem. Call the police and tell them to go check it out. The night that the shooting happened, nobody called anybody. And our camera is in the back of the house, so we couldn't even see the cars parked on the street. So, I mean, I did get a call and was at the house 10 minutes after the shooting did happen. I was right there with the police giving them all the footage. Detectives have all of our video footage. We bring a lot of revenue in for the birders. Birders leave our house after the week they stayed, get on the app and book for the next year. So we do bring a lot of revenue in for that. The workers that stay here all winter, they usually book a month to 3 months at a time. So they're here staying, you know, eating at our local restaurants, things like that. I know our Airbnbs all have enough parking in driveways, so we don't usually have street parking unless a party slips by, like did happen at ours. That would be the only reason there's street parking. But like they said, Airbnb does do ID checks and things like that. And then we also can eventually kind of see where they're from. And we do ask questions, you know, especially on weekends. You know, if you live right in Toledo, what are you coming here to use our house for? And some of them will just retract right then. Some of them will say, hey, me and my husband just want a night away, you know, and we kind of go from there. But
And the good news, we didn't turn it into HUD. We could have turned them into HUD and had a real mess in there. So we, you know, my main goal for our section of town is to make it look nicer than to
we do have a
make
lot
it
of
look bad.
vacation families who come here on vacation to
Lots.
bring their children and
Spend-
ask us, what is there to do here? You know, and Mommy Bay, and we're telling them things they can do in Oregon. And, you know, we actually had a family who came and stayed at our Lilas one and wanted to know, well, what can we do here in the winter? You know, and it was like, go over to Mommy Bay, you can walk the trails, you know, it may be a little cold, you know, you might need a warm up. You know, the ribbon, you know, the ice skating, even though that's right over the line, you know, it's not bringing money to Oregon, but, you know, giving them different things, you know, there's hockey, there's this restaurant, there's Oregon Inn, go try that, you know, they're known for this. You know, just bringing, they ask us, what is there to do? Where should we go eat? You know, we're always giving them local businesses to, you know, do things in the summer where I have a boat captain that lives next door to me who does fishing. You know, I'm always telling them, if you wanna go do a charter, here, you know? So they do bring in money to the community, you know, people bring their families to vacation. So.
So thank you guys for all your time. And so all we want to do is just make it nicer and not create a mess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. And I would just say, you know, in response to that too, I think our role in this is to try to find the happy balance between good neighbors, good communities, good opportunities. And I think that's why we're trying to investigate this, really dig in for all those involved from both sides of, you know, we see all of that. So that's the hard balance of coming up with the solution that makes sense and works, and something that we believe we can stand with. So it may take us a little bit to get there, but, you know, sometimes great ideas do. So thank you all for coming in this evening. So that would close our persons and delegations for the evening. We'll move into the agenda itself. Council, we have a number of items on the agenda for consideration for movement to our regular agenda for next week. We will start with item number 9 of 2024, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and City Administrator Joel Mazer. Joel?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, council. This first item is for this ordinance would be to enter into a contract with First Energy or Toledo Edison to convert all of these streetlights to LED lights. If you look in your packets, there's you know, an explanation that kind of walks everybody through it and what the payback would be for the city over a period of time. And right now, we did do an analysis. We work with Palmer Energy on a lot of things, but they actually did an analysis for us. So what they did is they did a cost savings analysis and an approximate energy savings analysis for converting all of the streetlights to LEDs. So that's all in here. There are about just over 1,500 streetlights throughout the city. And First Energy only has a certain type of lights that they use. So if you flip through, and the types of lights are on the page 2 of 2 of the Toledo Edison streetlight options. So on that back page, there's 3 different options, and it just depends on what type of street pole or street light that's on the pole right now is what they'll change it out to. So there's these 3 different options. So obviously most of them are the Cobra headlights. So that's what Toledo Edison would change these lights out to. But right now it's about a little over a 3.5-year payback. And that's at a cost of approximately $324,000. I'm sorry. We pay about $27,000 per month right now for street lighting. Nick, that can confirm that it's about $300,000 annually. Is that? So what we're proposing is the recommendation is that we actually pay for. We do have our streetlights are paid out of our assessment account, our assessment fund, and there are a lot of different services that come out of that fund. Right now, there's roughly $800,000 and some change. And what we're proposing is that we enter into a contract with First Energy. And in their contract, there's 3 different options. We select option 1, which would be to pay for all of the lights up front. They'll set up a schedule, and over a period of about 12 to 15 months, they'll phase in the change out of all the LED lights, and then we'll be billed accordingly as those phases are completed. Obviously, it'll be a reduced amount once the LED lights are changed out because they use less electricity. So therefore, it should be the payback should be a little quicker. Since it's assessed annually through a citywide assessment. So that annual assessment will eventually go down. Right now, we have an excess of $800,000, and we would propose that we could pay for all of the lights out of that account right now. And then eventually, if we need to, we can do a citywide assessment to help replenish that fund if needed. So as of right now, what we propose is that we would handle that on an annual basis. So that, I guess in the end is, what this comes down to is, even in the short term, we could actually reduce the amount of taxes that the property owners would have to pay right now. And then in the long term, there could be even greater savings to the ratepayers, so, or to the taxpayers. So I guess it's all kind of explained in here. I kind of went through it pretty quickly. So if there is, if anybody has any questions and any of the material that's presented right now, whether it's the contract or the explanation or the analysis, let's open it up to questions right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mazur. Council.
Go ahead, Mr. Drake.
All right,
Mr. Drake.
thanks, Mr. Horniak. I've had some people in the older neighborhoods up in the New Eastmoreland, Eastmoreland, and across the street, mainly behind Marco's Pizza. And I drove through there a few times that night, and I talked to Paul Roman about it. I believe the lights work fine, but the globes, I believe, are plastic. Were kind of like how headlights start to fade after a certain amount of time. And Paul did say they were thinking about putting in the LED lights, which would take care of that problem. So I just wonder if there's any plan to, pick, work from the west to the east or something, just for the fact that they're older houses and the lighting's older.
Thank you, Mr. Drake.
And I can answer that the best I
Joel,
can.
please.
Thank you, Mr. President. These lights are owned by Toledo Edison, but we do pay for them. So they do offer this option. So since they own the lights, they'll change them out and they'll set the schedule, but we can always recommend or at least request that they start in a certain area. If that's an area of the city we want to start in, then we can ask them to start there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Wallenczak?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mazur, you had said that you own, there's 1,590 units. What's the lead time on them, and will they be able to come up with 1,500 units to replace those in a timely manner?
That's a great question. I'll say, let me start with the process. So if this is approved by city council, we'll sign the contract, enter in the contract with First Energy. And what they'll do is a field assessment to get an accurate count. Right now, this is what it's showing in their system. So it's somewhere between, I think when we talked to Victor Coleman, who's the new Meg Adams for our area, he had in their system, I think, 1,600, but that was total. We already do have some LED lights in the city. So those would obviously drop off. So when they do their assessment, we'll get an accurate count of how many streetlights they have. But they've assured us that the process takes about 12 to 15 months.
Okay.
And
that would be citywide in a year?
That'd be citywide.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know that when Councilman Zale was present, a member of council, he had spoken about, I'm not even sure the term that's used, or it's kind of downcast where it doesn't go up, the light doesn't go up, and it helps with the night sky. Obviously, I see that there's no option for that in this proposal.
Just what you see in the Cobra
Yeah.
headlight.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you would replace with like items.
Yeah, correct.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Mr. Mazur. Council, any other questions? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 9 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I make a motion to move item number 9 of 2024 to next week's regular meeting agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Drake. Council, any objections to item 9 moving to next week's agenda? Hearing none, item 9 is placed on next week's agenda. Moving on to item 10, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Law Director Melissa Purpura, and we'll go to Ms. Purpura on this.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance would be to allow the city to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Attorney General's Office for delinquent debt collection. This would be for the Oregon Municipal Court. The Ohio Revised Code does permit the Ohio Attorney General's office to enter into these agreements to assist municipalities with the collection of delinquent debts. This comes at no cost to the Oregon Municipal Court. This is the exact same agreement that council authorized for the tax department in 2023. The type of debts that the AG's office would be collecting for the Oregon Municipal Court would be restitution for victims of crime, unpaid court fines, and court cost. The initial, any monies coming in, the priority or the first thing paid would be restitutions for victims of crime. The AG's office does have a greater reach as they are able to reach the tax returns and gambling individuals who win in gambling. They can get to the reach of that also. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Pora. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to move item 10 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
President,
Mr. Wolenczak.
thank you, Mr. President. I make a motion to move item number 10 of 2024 to next week's regular meeting agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Wolenczak.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Polliff. Council, any objection? Hearing none, item 10 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Moving on to item 11 of 2024, again presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Finance Director Nick Roman, and we'll go to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is for a supplemental appropriation. There's 3 different items on here. One of them we talked about at the Recreation Committee meeting, which was for Boom Fest. It was agreed to that we would add 30,000 of city funds to be able to be appropriated towards Boom Fest expenses. The other 2 items were items that were talked about, and one was missed when being put into the budget, and that is for administrative fees for our fire billing. That was something that we just started having last year, and it was just missed when we went to go through the budget. So that's 30,000 that we will be having to pay, adding in there. And the other item is for a dump truck for the water distribution. It was put into the budget, but the amount was entered into the quantity and there was no unit cost applied to it. So although it was in the budget, there was no money appropriated for it. So we are asking to appropriate that now.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions for Mr. Roman on item 11? Hearing none, I'll seek.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, I just want some clarification. So just so I understand it correctly. So there's 60,000 in the 24 budget for Boom Fest already allotted, correct?
So there is 30,000 of city funds appropriated out of the general fund, and there's 30,000 out of the community events fund that is assumed to be donations given into the city. So what we did is we added 30,000 out of the 101 general fund to be transferred to the community events fund. So an additional 30,000 of city funds was added.
So this was the amount that was already okayed in the 24 budget?
It's in addition to the original 30. So it'd be 60,000 of city funds that will now be appropriated to community events.
So it would be 120,000 for Boom Fest then?
No, so now we would officially have 90,000 appropriated.
90,000.
As of right now. That's
Okay.
60,000 of city funds and 30,000 of assumed donations.
And you can't, this has to be, it looks kind of congressional where it's all lumped together, with some other necessary items. Is there any such thing as itemizing these, I guess I would rather vote on them individually versus collectively in one item. Is that possible?
Mr. Roman?
I would think we could do that. It would just be an additional supplemental appropriation ordinance. So we could just split it out onto a separate ordinance. Yes, we could do that.
How does now, okay, so
I'll let
can I
you-
make a motion to break this into separate? The items that were already applied for and approved in the 24 budget and the new items, can we break them into separate
Let's ask, Ms. Ackerman's request, and I'll go to Ms. Purpura or Mr. Mazer on this, is can these be broken into individual line items for vote versus one overall ordinance? Obviously, as presented this evening, that would have to be changed or withdrawn.
Yeah, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Mazer.
I believe with this ordinance, the way it sits, the motion would have to be to amend it.
Oh,
So if you
okay.
want to amend it, you can do that. But then if you have to have separate ordinances, then a separate ordinance would have to be brought on. But you can amend this specific ordinance to try to achieve what it is that you're looking to.
Well, I'm just trying to keep it, sort of there are the things that are necessary for function in the city, and then there are the entertainment things. And it's like pork in a bill that's facing the Congress, where it's like the whole kit and caboodle, it's all or nothing. So I didn't know if it was possible to just keep it separate so that the votes may remain separate. The things that are necessary to city function, and then the things that are entertainment items.
I understand what you're going for, and I believe, if I'm understanding Mr. Mazer's answer, is you would have to make a motion to
Okay.
amend the item as presented to what you would like that to be.
Okay.
And then we would have to have a second, and I believe we would have to have a vote with an amendment. Does it have to be a 5-2, or is it a simple majority?
And if I may.
Yes.
We actually, since we're in a committee with the whole,
Go ahead.
I mean, there could be a request to have that amended, and we could bring it back at the next council meeting to have it amended in any such way that council would desire. So,
Mr. President?
Mr. Wallen's
Thank you, Mr. President. Can't we just pull this from this evening and just walk on what Mrs. Ackerman is talking about?
good, yeah. That's what.
I didn't know how
council wants to do.
timely some of the purchases were as far as the fire billing or the dump truck. So I don't want to hold up things that are pertinent.
Ms. Ackerman, I believe if we do that and withdraw item 11 from tonight's consideration, the administration would go back and address your concerns, your comments with this, and bring this back likely as 4 different or 3 different, whatever it amounts to be, different items to be considered, and they would just be presented for passage and consideration at next week's meeting. So I think the decision point would stay the same.
Okay,
The legal action would be taken
that's
next
true.
week
We
if
wouldn't
done
vote till
so.
next week. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
So with that, does the administration want to withdraw, or do we need to make a motion to withdraw?
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
I thought at the committee meeting, the council unanimously said they supported it. So I don't understand what you're really trying to accomplish.
There was not a vote. I did not vote on that. Did you guys recall a vote on that additional money for Boom Fest?
I do recall a question being asked, does anybody have any objection to it? And no one did.
No, I did not get that question.
Okay. I would just say, my recollection is the same. Do we want to proceed and go ahead with Boom Fest based on the funding that we talked about during that meeting? So to the mayor's point, again, if we want it withdrawn, I believe we'd have to make a motion to withdraw for reconsideration, correct?
Correct.
That would need a second. And then would we need an affirming vote even with this being committee of the whole? So as long as it's got a motion and a second, it can be withdrawn to be rewritten for the regular meeting next
Yep.
week.
That's right.
Mr. President,
Okay. Yes, Mr. Reeves.
I'm a little confused about the why. We held that committee meeting through the Parks and Recreation, and we did ask if there was any objections to it. And I don't have the paperwork right here in front of me, but I believe all council people were there. I don't see why we have to make more work for the administration and for Mr. Roman, Mr. Nick Roman, to appropriate the 30,000 that we had, that we agreed upon to be with the 60, and then the other 30 was going to be from the private donations that, correct me if I'm wrong,
Correct.
Mr. Roman. And that we had talked about that at our committee meeting that we held, I think it was January 18th or something like that, one of those, or 22nd, when we had that meeting. So I'm a little confused as to why we need to change something that we've already asked and it was not brought up at that time.
Well, Mr. Reeves, I
Hang on.
apologize for my
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Hang on.
inexperience. Oh,
Thank-
sorry, sir,
Thank,
sorry.
thank you, Mr. Reeves. for
Thank
your
you,
comments.
Mr. President.
And I understand the point of view. Ms. Ackerman, if you'd like
Yeah,
to
sorry. I
further explain?
I apologize that you have, 17 years or whatever it is of experience and I'm new, I'm a novice. I believe that you were discussing bringing it out, but I didn't know it was going to be tied to some necessities for operating the city. And so otherwise I would have, had I known they'd be lumped together like this, it was a Parks and Rec meeting, it wasn't about fire billing or water distribution dump trucks. So I was just unfamiliar that you would lump spending. That's what I say, it reminds me of Congress, where you put some fluff in with the stuff that's necessary in order to get it through. And it could very well go through. So just pardon my inexperience, but I don't know if Mr. Roman would be so put out as to keep things that are necessary for function away from so that they can be voted on separately. So it becomes a matter of record that how people vote. Cause I got elected to question things like this. So I'm sorry for, I'm annoying to those of you that have been here forever. But if you could do that, and I will have learned that if you mention it in a committee meeting, that means you agreed that you're doing it, you want it. I certainly would have been more vocal at the time. I apologize.
Okay, and
Mr. President.
one moment, Mr. Reeves. Ms. Ackerman, if I may, in many things, when we're doing intra and inter-fund movements through accounts, there are many times where there are multiple items as a single transaction, so it is one transfer amongst the funds. That's not done as let's put it in with something else. It's done as a simple matter of efficiency. Because there's times at the end of the year where we will have a page or 2 pages of inter-fund transfers that need to take place to balance the books at the end of the year. So that's not an unusual piece for these to be put together as one ordinance for multiple funds. But I do understand the ask. Mr. Reeves.
I understand the ask, I don't understand the purpose.
I think that
Ms. Ackerman?
oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
But with that being said, I think we're using a term that Ms. Ackerman has already used. We're adding more stuff or bogging down, just like the federal government, where they don't get anything done.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Ms. Ackerman.
I think the number one complaint of most taxpayers is that the pork that gets put in with the items that are necessary for the day-to-day living of citizens and is a justifiable ask. And I just think that when we're voting, I think the citizens should know how we're voting when it comes to items that are necessary versus spending that is a want and not a need. And I guess I don't know why that's an issue. I would think you guys would want that clarity as well, but I thought it didn't hurt to ask.
Mr. President?
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Mr. Reeves, we'll go one more time and I'm going to call for question.
Thank you. Like I said, I don't understand the purpose. I don't think it's that big of a deal. it was brought up, discussed, talked about, whatever we want to say, but I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, I'm going to kind of call for the question to wrap up discussion on this particular item. Basically, what I'm asking for at this point in time is either a motion to proceed with item 11 of 2024 on next week's agenda, or a motion different than that.
Is this where, excuse me, is this where I would make a motion to amend or
Mhm.
that's, oh, okay, sorry. I'd like to make a motion to amend to keep the entertainment spending separate from the necessities.
I think you'd have to identify the specific
okay.
line items that you would want voted on separately.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the Boom Fest monies to be voted on separate from the dump truck and the fire billing administration fees?
If I may, Mr.
Yeah,
President.
Mr. Mazur, please help us wade through this.
The motion is to separate this out into two separate ordinances. One with just the community events line item and the other one to have as the other three items on as one, as two separate pieces of legislation. Is that correct?
Sounds appropriate. Ms. Ackerman, does that?
Yeah, the one
Seem to
Boom
match.
Fest amount was, I guess, it was already in the budget, correct? So the
Yeah.
additional 30,000.
Yeah, the one out of the 271 fund, is that
Yeah, the
So-
additional of 271
If I
funds.
may.
Mr.
So-
Roman?
So yeah, it would be to separate the Boom Fest line items from the other items. Because yes, both of those appropriations for the Boom Fest need to be appropriated, because one is out of 101 in order to transfer it to the 271 community events, and then 30,000 appropriated into community events for Boom Fest. That makes sense.
So it would be, pardon me.
No, you're okay.
President.
Mr. Mazur.
So it would be to amend item number 11 to remove the Boom Fest line item and then to have a separate piece of legislation come, and a separate appropriations measure come before council for just that one line item. So there would just be an additional,
Thank you.
so, sorry.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
thank
I
you,
need a
thank you. I'm
clarification for myself too.
Learning the
but-
lingo,
Okay,
sorry.
so I'll say item 3 under item 11. So the 271 fund item to be separated out for its own consideration would be the motion. Does that sound accurate to your
Yes,
wishes,
yes,
Ms. Ackerman?
thank you.
Mr. President, it would be item 1 and item 3, both. Yes, those two. items,
Okay.
yes.
So item 1 and item 3 within item 11, which is out of Fund 101 and Fund 271, which would separate the community offense, everything relative to Boom Fest into its own ordinance, and a separate ordinance be presented for the Fund 235 and the Fund 610. Fair to say? Okay,
Thank you.
so moved.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salander. Ms. Rossen, can you call a vote on acceptance of the move and the second to
Mr.
amend
President.
as presented? Mr. Drake.
Just for clarification, I'm kind of like Terry. I'm confused. To sum it up, for me to comprehend it, we're going to be voting for one or two items or three items, if this would pass.
If it is agreed to amend, it'd be two separate appropriations. One would be for Boom Fest, which is appropriating money in the general fund to move to the community events fund and appropriate the money in the community events. The other ordinance would be to approve the appropriation for the fire billing account and for the water revenue account.
Okay.
So two separate ordinances.
Okay, are we going to vote for both of those two now, or one now and one next week?
No, we'd be voting for the amendment this evening
Mhm.
on whether this would be split into two ordinances or whether it would be just one ordinance. That's what we'd be voting on at this point
Thank you.
from council.
Thanks.
Ms. Purpura, am I accurate in my assessment? Mr. Mazer? I think we're all trying to walk through, figuring this out through a committee of the whole, because I think during a meeting, it becomes clearer in the committee of the whole from presentation. Mayor, it looks like you have something procedurally. Let's go there.
I would
Mayor?
like to do something and offer something that will simplify this all, is that the reason the question I asked at the committee meeting was not to deceive anyone. Like, Sacramento saying, what is it, this is a deception thing to try to get this through. It is
didn't-
absolutely not.
I
All right,
didn't
It
see
is
But that-
absolutely
let's
not
hang on.
that.
It-
And so it was to present that all, because I'm a little behind the 8 ball right now. So the question was asked and everybody, or no one objected, all right? But if I have no problem, because I would like to be as transparent as possible, is just, I would ask you that we take item number 11 to return it back to the administration, and we will represent it in multiple things next week. But you will see it here, and you will have to then vote to add more items to consideration. And there won't have to be any amendments. It'll be simple. And once again, to make the claim that it was to deceive someone so that you could group it together and force it through is absolutely not the case.
All right.
That's crazy.
Mr. President,
Let's.
I just want to say thank you
Mr.
for the
Walczak.
clarification that this is the appropriate way to do it. Pull it, bring it back in two separate,
Yeah.
no amendments.
Yeah.
That's the cleanest way to do
We
it.
would have done it like that.
Thank you.
Correct.
Done it.
So that would
And- yeah, thank you very
negate the
much.
need for that. So item 11 is going to be pulled from the agenda for consideration for movement to next week's agenda. The administration will represent next week at the regular meeting.
Very good.
Thank you. It's a long way home to say, let's revisit. Item 12, again, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Parks and Recreation Director Tim Borton. And Mr. Borton, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is our annual lawn care agreement. This year, True Green was the successful bidder in the project. It's kind of gone back and forth between them and Landart the last several years. So they're the ones that take care of all our fertilization needs on our whole complex here at the rec, and also some weed control at like South Shore Park and the playground area.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, any questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves?
thank you. Mr. Borton, and I'm just asking, we couldn't do a better, we couldn't do this ourselves, correct? For what they're charging because of the fertilizer and all that, and plus the man hours?
Correct. They're buying fertilizer in bulk, so they're getting a better rate on the chemicals. Plus, there's certain licensures that have to be in place that we don't have on staff here in the city.
Thank you. I just wanted the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, any other questions? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 12 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salinger. We have a motion and a second. Council, any objections? Item 12 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Next item on the agenda is item 13 of 2024, again also presented by Mayor Safarian and Parks and Recreation Commissioner Tim Borton, and we'll go to you, Mr. Borton.
This is an ordinance, again, we've done for the last several years. These are essentially our main vendors for uniforms and equipment in the Parks and Rec Department. Not that we can't have other vendors, but these vendors, historically, we end up spending close to or above $25,000, which is the level we need to come to council for an ordinance. So the last few years, we've done at the beginning of the year, basically saying that we are authorized to spend at least $25,000, maybe more, with these vendors, with the understanding that everything will go out on a bid basis and the best bid criteria will be met. And these are the vendors that have been successful bidders in the past.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I apologize, Mr. Borton, but, do we have a breakdown of, from the other vendors of, was this like the lowest and best bid?
We don't have any breakdown at this point because we haven't really purchased uniforms at this point in time. These are just vendors from the past several years that we've spent $25,000 or more with based on
So-
their bids. So it's a, I don't want to say preemptive, but it's basically asking ahead of time for permission to spend money with these vendors that may exceed that $25,000 mark.
And, excuse me, Mr. President.
Go ahead, Mr. Reeves.
Thank you. So what, if I'm reading this correctly, excuse me, all of these companies that are listed here, those are the companies we're gonna deal with or send out to get bids?
Those are the ones, but if there are other ones, we've done that in the past too, where we get a bidder that may not be on this list that comes in that gives us a good price. And we can add them as another ordinance later on if we get to that $25,000 threshold. These aren't the only vendors we deal with. These are just the main ones for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, any additional questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake?
Mr. Borton, is there like something where these companies that print shirts and buy pants, sell the sports gear, whatever it may be, is there like a website or something that the city has that they're gonna be taking bids for 10,000 baseball jerseys and 300 soccer balls, or how does that work? I guess, how does a company know if they can bid on something?
We send out an email to the companies that we've done business with in the past, letting them know we're taking bids. Because of some of the supply chains issues the last several years, we'll send that out on a kind of per season basis. So like right now, we have bids out there for soccer, baseball, softball, some of the sports that are coming up. And if some company would be interested in that, that's not on our list, all they have to do is ask and we pass that on to them as well.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Borton? Council, any other questions? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 13 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves?
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Wallenczak. We have a motion and a second. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 13 of 2024 is moved to the next week's agenda. Next item is item 14 of 2024, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Acting Public Service Director Rodney Schultz. Rodney.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to proceed with the construction of the Coy Road resurfacing project. Out of the two bids that received, the Shelley Company was the lowest and best bid. The Shelley Company bid was over the engineer's estimate by about 7%, but it was 150 less than the second bidder. Right now, with the way bids are, it's hard to get. A lot of these contractors have a lot of work already in place, so and it seems like unit prices are going up. So still feel like this is still a good deal. We have worked with the Shelley Company on other projects, and they've performed pretty well. So we're confident that they can do a good job for us. This project, we do have a $500,000 grant or $500,000 grant through the Surface Transportation Block Grant through TMACOG. So that'll be part of the funding. The project involves basically resurfacing 1.3 miles of Coy Road, starting from the Flights East Meadow Drive all the way up to Warden Road is area one. The next section will be just north of Navarre, where we left off with the Navarre Coy project, all the way up to Star Avenue, just short of Star, and then from Star to Seaman. The project will also involve adding paved shoulders along the sides of the road. So we'll be doing a little bit of widening to add paved shoulders. And then we will also be adding sidewalk where we don't have sidewalk along the west side of Coy. So we'll have a continuous sidewalk all the way from Seaman Road down to Flights. So that's all part of the project. Project should be complete by mid-August is the contract time. Happy to answer any other questions anybody might have.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to thank Mr. Schultz and his department that we are going to have the paved widening or the edges of the road for that. The bikes riding on that road, it's kind of a tight passing when you're coming across that. So thank you for your consideration and putting that through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack. Council, any other questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake?
Mr. Schultz, will they still put a berm along the widening?
Thank you. Mr. Schultz?
There'll be a small amount just to kind of fill in. We'll have to do something, but we'll have to be building up the sides a little bit, but there won't be as wide of a berm as you would currently have along a roadway because we'll have the paved berm.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Drake.
there'll also be some minor drainage improvements with the sidewalks and things like that. So project does involve a few catch basins and things like that to make sure the area is drained.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Council, any other questions? Hearing no other questions, I'll ask for a motion to move item 14 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Drake. We have a motion and a second. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 14 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Moving on to item 15, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Building and Zoning Commissioner Stephen Schrake, and we'll go to Mr. Schrake.
Thank you, Mr. President. Title VI, Flood Control, Chapter 1165, Flood Damage Prevention Regulation Ordinance was last adopted in Oregon in 2011. FEMA has identified the deadline to update our community's floodplain management regulations as required with the revised Lucas County flood hazard maps, which take effect February 22nd of 2024. Our updated floodplain management ordinance, including reference to the new flood maps and flood study, must be adopted, effective, and enforceable by this date per FEMA. This action will enable our community to remain in good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program. I'd like to direct everyone to the second paragraph of FEMA's letter in your packet. The City of Oregon must adopt floodplain management measures such as floodplain management ordinance that meet or exceed the minimum NFIP requirements by February 22nd, 2024 to avoid suspension from the NFIP. If suspended, our community becomes ineligible for flood insurance through NFIP, new insurance policies cannot be sold, and existing policies cannot be renewed. The language that has been presented is language that was provided by FEMA as updated by ODNR, who are the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, who are the NFIP state coordinator for Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Schrake. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 15 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Wallensack. Council, we have a motion and a second. Are there any objections? Hearing none, item 15 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Next item for consideration is item 16 of 2024, presented by Mayor Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began. And Chief, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Mr. President. This ordinance is necessary to enter into an agreement for the federal equitable sharing. What the federal equitable sharing agreement does is when we work with federal agencies on large cases, if there's any type of forfeitures or anything related to those cases, they get divvied up and we'll get a portion of that for equivalent to the amount of hours that we worked in the overall case and what percentage that is. So this fund brings in money from those once the forfeiture goes through and they're auctioned off or whatever takes place if there's cash there. Goes into our account. We can use it for training. We can use it for equipment, facility use, utility payments, drug gang and other prevention and awareness programs. So this money comes in over the years, it goes into an account that rolls over, and we can use it for necessary items. Be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 16 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Polliff?
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Polliff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salander. Council, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any objections? Hearing none, item 16 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Next item on the agenda is item 17 of 2024, presented by Mayor Mike Safarian and Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien. I believe this is some of what we discussed in committee meeting this evening. So we'll kick it over to you, Chief O'Brien.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Mayor. This is the ordinance that would be needed for us to enter into the agreement with Lucas County, as we discussed in the safety committee meeting. If there's any questions, then I can address those.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any additional questions on item 17? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 17 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Polliff.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Polliff. Second by Mr. Salander. We have a motion and a second. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 17 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Item 18 of 2024, again, we'll go back to Chief Clayton O'Brien. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance here is for Boundtree Medical. Again, an ordinance that's needed to when you expend funds over 25,000. Boundtree Medical is where we purchase all of our EMS supplies, or majority of them. As you'll note in this one, these supplies and the reason of use in the Boundtree Medical is always due to the fact that we've gotten the lowest bid price of Lucas County EMS doing the bidding. That contract does run through 2025, so we're still able to piggyback on those same prices. So that's what this ordinance is.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Council? Hearing no questions on item 18 of 2024, I'll seek a motion to move it to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Polliff.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Polliff.
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Salander. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 18 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Item 19 on the agenda, again, we'll go back to you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance here is for Superior Uniforms. Again, an annual ordinance that we do every year. Large uniform supplier for public safety, and we utilize them frequently. So again, it'll be over that $25,000.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions? Hearing none. Okay, hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 19 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Polliff.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Polliff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salander. Thank you. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 19 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Moving on to item 20 of 2024, and again, we'll go to Chief O'Brien. Chief.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance here is for Atlantic Emergency Solutions. They're located in Findlay. They do a lot of our heavy truck work on our engines and our ladder trucks. This is the work that would be outside the scope of what could be done at American Enterprise. If we can get if Ken and American Enterprise can do the work, you'll see an ordinance here in a few that we do take it to them, but otherwise there is some specialty work that needs to go to Atlantic.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 20 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Polliff.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Polliff.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 20 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Next item on the agenda is item 21 of 2024. I believe this is the same, so I believe, I'm sorry. Okay, that's what I thought. Presented again by Chief O'Brien, so Chief, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance that you see is for Tri-County Tire. For all of our non-big trucks or support vehicles, this would be for all of our oil changes. Tri-County was the lowest and best bid for all of our oil changes.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion for item 21 to move item 21 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pollitt.
so moved.
Thank you, Ms. Pollitt.
Second?
Seconded by Mr. Salander. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 21 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Item 22 of 2024, again, we'll go back to Chief O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is our annual for American Enterprise, which majority of our work that we can get done would be done locally. And this would be for any work on the bigger trucks.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 22 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pollitt.
so moved.
Thank you, Ms. Pollitt.
Second?
Mr. Salander, second by Mr. Salander. Thank you, Mr. Salander. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 22 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Last item on the agenda for this evening is item 23 of 2024. And again, we go to Chief O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would request that I could have Assistant Chief Mark Mullins speak on this ordinance. He worked intimately with this ordinance.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Mullins.
Thank you, Mr. President. For over 43 years, the fire department, along with the Oregon Fire Regional Training Center, has offered training to the highest level with the simulators, props, and the live fire training center that we have. What this will allow us to do is have affiliation agreements with other training centers, adult education, industrial fire brigades, and the like, as well as career centers and other fire departments to do training at our training facility. So that affiliation agreement is just simply a signature from that affiliation to us saying, yes, come on over and train at our facilities.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Mullins. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 23 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pollitt.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Pollitt.
Second?
Seconded by Mr. Salander. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 23 of 2024 is moved to next week's regular agenda. That closes all items we have for consideration this evening. We would now go to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, but I have no report.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mazer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have one mulligan. I'd like to at least provide council with explanation for the LED ordinance. After the field, if council approves of the contract with First Energy, afterwards, we would sign the contract, send it in, they would do the field analysis, and then we would get a quote from them. And then we'll come back to, if that's the case, if council approves it, then we'll come back to city council at that time for supplemental appropriation for the amount for the, of the contract to change out the lights. So that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mazer. Ms. Purpura.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Mr. Schultz.
Yes, next Monday, we're gonna have a public open forum to present our draft Safe Routes to School travel plan. That was the plan that last fall, we had an open house. We also did a walking audit with our consultant Tool Design and city and community members to come up with the plan. So this is kind of presenting what was found at what we discovered from the public meeting and then also through our work. So we'll be presenting that and then kind of finalizing it. And then the goal would be at the last council meeting in February to have council kind of adopt or endorse the plan. That would be then presented to ODOT, so they have it on file. And then we would be eligible then to apply for Safe Routes to School funding for actual projects.
And that meeting takes place when, Mr. Schultz?
I'm sorry, it'll be next Monday at 5:30 here. So kind of 5:30 to 6 is what we're kind of planning.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Reeves.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mrs. Pollitt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight we held a safety committee meeting with the purpose of discussing the EMS contract and the community-driven strategic plan. Thank you for everyone who attended. Thank you to Chief O'Brien for putting together the very detailed meeting that was really eye-opening and gave us a look at what we're looking at for the next 5 years. So what I'm thinking is We're gonna need some more meetings for March, so we can take and discuss it, getting it ready for anything we need to put forth to the Board of Elections or whatever deadlines that we need to meet in April. We need to set up these meetings to get that started. And also to discuss anything further with that. So I know that we ended it quickly because it was 7 o'clock. So I just wanted to put that out there because we didn't close it with that. So thank you very much for all your input on this. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spalla.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, go ahead, Mayor.
Kathy, you could check the math. I think you'll see that's 6 years.
6 years? I don't have the paper open in front of me. So I knew
All
it
right.
was from 24
24
to
to
29.
24 to 29.
So I just went with
6
5.
years by my math.
Well,
All right.
9 minus 4 is 5. so-
Close enough. We'll do a little fudging for the math on that for Ms. Spalla. Grace considered. Thank you, Ms.
Thanks for the
Spalla.
correction.
Mr. Wallensack.
Thank you, Mr. President. Following up on what Ms. Councilwoman Pauloff was mentioning, I will look to have a finance committee meeting for you for that purpose. So we can discuss how we're going to move forward on funding, probably late February, early March, so that we have appropriate time to take action. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack. Mrs. Ackerman.
Thank you for your forbearance and my learning curve with all this. I don't think there's a manual for the environmental committee, at least not that I've heard of, but I am going to meet with our environmentalist, Don Nelson, tomorrow, and he's going to walk me through what his job's comprised of and the projects that the city's working on. And I want to invite anybody. Kim Kaufman reached out to me, and I'll be meeting with her regarding anything we can do to improve our image with the Black Swamp Bird Observatory and the biggest week in birding coming up. If anybody wants to be involved in meeting up, just let me know. And I want to thank Joel for all the information regarding the LED lights. And I'm sorry I sicked Steve Dunaway on you, but he is the most learned person I know when it comes to Toledo Edison. So that there was a wealth of information there about the LED switchover. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Mr. Salinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to kind of echo Kathy's comment about the safety meeting also. I really appreciate it, and it really clarified a lot of questions I had just kind of reading through. So thank you so much for that. A nice job. I did meet last week. I did take a tour over at the water plant. So I did get to meet with Doug and Steve over there. I was extremely impressed. We don't realize everything that goes into when you flip that faucet and turn the water on to have that clean water to drink. So a lot of science involved, way above my level for sure, but very interesting and very, very grateful. The other thing, just real quickly, I had attended to play with the Clay Limelighters last week, and it was absolutely outstanding. We have a lot of talent over there, and it's just very impressive. So they do have another show coming up in April as well, so keep an eye on that. That's about all I have, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salinger. Mr. Drake.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. And for my committee for this evening, I do want to set a committee meeting for the Economic Development Committee. We're looking to meet next Monday, February 12th, 2024 at 6 p.m. And we'll be discussing updating the citywide comprehensive master plan. Council, as you know, the bids have been out. They've been reviewed. We believe we're close on selection process. Final discussions are taking place. The meeting next week will be more to discuss as a committee and as a council and as a city, what exactly it is we want to try to drive and accomplish with this program, and to take input from all members with what your thoughts and your inputs may be with that. So we'll set that for 6 p.m. Since there is a meeting scheduled in here for 5:30 for Mr. Schultz's presentation on the safe routes to schools, we will plan on meeting in the conference room. We may get snug, but we'll figure it out as we go. It'd be a great problem to have. I have nothing else from my standing committee. With that, council, I'd seek a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salander. Council, any objections? Hearing none, meeting's adjourned.